What do you want?
On the Epstein files, you talked about Democrats who were in there. Elon Musk was also in there, and so was your Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and correspondence that he had with him. Did you read those new files that were published by the Department of Justice?
I didn't. I have a lot of things I'm doing, a lot of things I'm doing. I don't know. You mentioned two names. I'm sure they're fine. Otherwise, it would have been major headlines.
A lot of women who are survivors of Epstein's are unhappy with those redactions that came out. Some of them, entire witness interviews are totally blacked out. Do you think that they should be more transparent?
The fact that they thought they released too much. I heard that, and you tell me something else. No. I think it's really time for the country to get onto something else. Really. Now that nothing came out about me, other than it was a conspiracy against me, literally, by Epstein and other people.
Hello guys, your host Adam here. Listen to this. The most powerful man in the world, a man who has built his entire political mythology on the roar of an adoring crowd, is now running scared from the very people he claims to lead. The soundtrack of his presidency, the chants of USA, USA, the thunderous applause, the adulation of thousands, is being drowned out by a new jarring sound, the deafening, visceral, public rejection of the American crowd.
On Saturday in the state of Texas, a Democrat, local union leader, and first-time political candidate Taylor Remmett won a special election for Texas state legislature, defeating his Republican opponent by 14 points. In a district, Trump won by 17 points just over a year ago. A 31-point swing toward Democrats in just 14 months. And then there's even more numbers. There's, of course, the polling. It's really hard, really hard, I can promise you, to win in a swing district. And all of that and more was probably on Trump's mind yesterday when he decided to catch up with a disgruntled former employee, the podcaster turned deputy FBI director turned podcaster again, Dan Bongino.
This is not a political downturn. This is a primal, psychological crisis playing out on the national stage. And the moment that crystallized it all, the moment that exposed the sheer, raw panic inside the Trump White House, came when he was forced to skip the Super Bowl, not because of national security, not because of a crisis, but because his own advisors, in a state of pure terror, begged him not to go. They warned him in so many words, Mr. President, if you show your face on that Jumbotron in front of 100 million people, they will boo you off the stage of American life. And for the first time, he listened. He stayed home. The man who flies across oceans for a photo op declared a 2-hour flight to California too far. Let that sink in. The strong man is scared of his own reflection in the crowd. We are witnessing the total collapse of a political brand in real time. Donald Trump's power has always been psychological, a projection of invincibility fueled by visible, tangible proof of mass devotion. The rallies were not just events. They were the engine of his movement, the evidence used to bludgeon critics and cow allies. Look at the crowds, was the ultimate retort. But what happens when the crowds turn hostile? What happens when the sea of red caps is replaced by a forest of middle fingers? What happens when the chants of Trump, Trump are overwhelmed by a guttural, stadium-shaking boo? The mask slips. The projection fails. And what's left is a visibly rattled man, flipping off factory workers and hiding from football games. This is the story of the great unraveling, not in the halls of Congress, but in the bleachers, on the factory floor, and in the theater balcony, where the people, unprompted and unscripted, are delivering their verdict. Let's begin with the Super Bowl that wasn't. Super Bowl LX, Levi's Stadium, Santa Clara, California. The most watched television event in America, a cultural touchstone where presidents have traditionally been able to bask in nonpartisan, patriotic goodwill. Just 1 year prior, Trump had made history by attending the Super Bowl in New Orleans, soaking in a mixed but manageable reception. It was a trophy for his narrative. But 2026 was a different America. According to deep background reports from advisors, a cold, hard calculation was made in the West Wing. The risk assessment was catastrophic. The game was in deep blue California. The halftime act was Bad Bunny, a vocal critic of Trump's immigration policies. The pre-game act was Green Day, whose lead singer has spent a decade lampooning him. The fan bases of the Seattle Seahawks and New England Patriots were not MAGA country. The advisor's conclusion, whispered to reporters, was blunt. Whatever the crowd makeup ends up being, it's not going to be a Turning Point USA speech. The chance of a monumental, televised humiliation was rather high. The clip of the president being booed by tens of thousands on live TV would be indefensible, immortal, and viral. It would be, in the words of one aide, another thing we don't want right now. A chilling admission that the administration is already navigating a minefield of disasters and cannot absorb another one. So, they pulled him. The public excuse was a geographic absurdity. California was too far. This from a president who conducts global diplomacy from Air Force One. The lie was so transparent it insulted the intelligence of the nation. The real reason was cowardice. Plain and simple. The man who claims the mantle of ultimate toughness was too afraid of the American people's reaction to show his face. This was a strategic surrender of the highest order. It was an admission that his connection with the public has become so toxic, so frayed, that his team fears putting him in an uncontrolled environment. The fuel for his entire political project, the crowd, is now seen as his greatest threat. To understand the magnitude of this panic, we must trace the breadcrumbs of public rejection that led to this moment. This is not an isolated incident. It is the climax of a pattern, a drumbeat of disdain growing louder and more impossible to ignore. Act 1. The Warning Shot. The Kennedy Center, June 2025. Trump and Melania attend the opening night of Les Miserables, a musical about a populist uprising against a corrupt, self-obsessed ruler. The irony was almost too perfect. As they took their seats, a wave of boos rolled through the refined theater audience. It was a pointed cultural rejection from the Washington elite he claims to despise. It stung, but could be dismissed as coastal liberal hatred. Act 2. The Earthquake. The Washington Commanders Game, November 2025. This was the turning point. Trump became the first sitting president since Jimmy Carter to attend a regular season NFL game. The setting should have been perfect, a patriotic, mainstream American event. Instead, it became a nightmare. When his face flashed on the giant stadium jumbotron, the reaction was immediate and volcanic. A sustained, roaring cascade of boos erupted from vast sections of the crowd, drowning out any scattered cheers. Fan videos captured seas of people not just booing, but holding up double middle fingers in unified contempt. Sitting beside him, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth wore a mask of stone-faced fury as the audible wrath of the crowd washed over them. The stadium didn't just disapprove, it rejected him. The White House's subsequent claims of massive cheers were laughably obliterated by the cell phone evidence. This was no liberal bubble. This was a football stadium in Landover, Maryland, a cross-section of America. The message was clear and undeniable. Act 3. The Unraveling. The Ford Factory, Dearborn, Michigan, January 13, 2026. If the stadium booing was a collective roar, this was a precision strike. Touring an F-150 assembly line, Trump was on a walkway above the factory floor. From below, a 40-year-old UAW line worker, TJ Sabala, shouted up a single devastating epithet: pedophile protector. The shout cut through the industrial noise, a direct reference to the haunting, unshakable shadow of the Epstein files. Trump stopped dead. He turned. He located the worker. And then the President of the United States, on camera, clearly mouthed the words, "follows you," twice, before raising his own middle finger in a juvenile, furious gesture. The video, captured on a worker's phone, was raw and undeniable. The White House, in a staggering misjudgment, called the response appropriate and unambiguous. Ford suspended Sabala. And then the country responded. The worker became an instant folk hero. A GoFundMe for his legal defense and support rocketed past $480,000 in 48 hours. The UAW vowed to protect his job. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib called him a hero. Sabala himself told the Washington Post, "I don't feel as though fate looks upon you often, and when it does, you better be ready to seize the opportunity. And today, I think I did that." He was not a political operative. He was an independent voting auto worker. He was the embodiment of the public sentiment Trump can no longer control or compartmentalize. And Trump's response wasn't presidential disdain. It was the brittle personal rage of a man whose ego had been directly pierced. Act 4. The Retreat. The Super Bowl No-Show. February 2026. After the factory, after the stadium, the calculus changed. The advisors saw a pattern they could no longer spin. The crowd had turned from a prop into a peril. The Super Bowl decision was the ultimate white flag. They retreated from the field of public judgment entirely. This cascade of rejection is not happening in a vacuum. It is the live audience reaction to a collapsing political reality. Let's look at the numbers that explain the boos. National approval, stuck in the low 40s, with disapproval solidly in the mid-50s, a double-digit net negative. Independent voters, a catastrophic collapse to 29% approval. These are the voters who decide elections, and they are fleeing. Key demographics. Support among Latinos and adults under 35 has plummeted from 41% at his second inauguration to just 30%. Signature issues. On immigration, his core issue, nearly 6 in 10 Americans believe ICE has gone too far. His approval on the issue is at a term low of 39%. The economy. Only 3 in 10 Americans rate the economy positively. The tangible pain of tariffs, costing households over $1,000 extra annually, is cutting through the rhetoric. The crowds are not an anomaly. They are a megaphone for these polling numbers. The stadium is a real-time, unfakeable focus group of 60,000 people. You cannot manufacture that sound. You cannot Photoshop a middle finger held high in a sea of people. This is the raw, unmediated feedback loop of a presidency going sour, and Trump's psychology is uniquely unequipped to process it. For Donald Trump, the crowd is not just support. It is oxygen, validation, and proof of existence. His first official fight as president was over the size of his inauguration crowd. His political life has been a curated gallery of images. Him surveying vast seas of supporters at rallies, waving to cheering fans at UFC fights, receiving applause at NASCAR events. These images are the pillars of his strongman persona. They are the evidence he uses to project dominance, to suggest that he alone channels the will of the people. The adoring crowd is the mirror in which he sees a powerful, beloved leader. But now, the mirror is cracking, and it is showing him a reflection he cannot bear. A leader who is openly scorned. The panic we are witnessing is the panic of a man whose source of power is evaporating. When he flipped off that factory worker, he wasn't just lashing out at a critic, he was trying to smash the cracked mirror. It was a tantrum against a reality he cannot control. His decision to hide from the Super Bowl is the logical next step. If the mirror shows you something horrifying, you stop looking at it. The political implications of this psychological crack-up are profound and far-reaching. 1. The end of intimidation. Trump's power over the Republican Party has always been rooted in the perceived ferocity and size of his base. GOP lawmakers fell in line because they feared the wrath of the crowd. But what happens when the most public crowds at national sporting events are booing him? The intimidation factor dissolves. It gives cover to nervous Republicans in swing districts. They now have visible public evidence that attaching themselves to Trump may not be an asset, but a lethal liability. The fear of the base is being replaced by the fear of the broader electorate. 2. The erosion of the strongman. Facade. Globally and domestically, Trump sells himself as a dealmaker who operates from a position of overwhelming domestic strength. How does that play in diplomatic chambers when the latest clip on every screen is of an American stadium jeering their president or of the president giving the finger to a blue-collar worker? It paints a picture of weakness, division, and a loss of control. It emboldens adversaries and worries allies. The Greenland fiasco, where European nations collectively rebuffed him, showed this erosion in foreign policy. The booing crowds show it in the realm of public morale. 3. The validation of opposition. For years, Trump has dismissed criticism as the work of the fake news elite, disconnected from real Americans. But TJ Sabala is a real American. The football fans in Maryland are real Americans. Their rejection cannot be dismissed as a media conspiracy. It gives concrete, powerful ammunition to Democrats and dissenting voices. They can now point and say, "It's not just us. Look, listen, the people themselves are saying it." 4. The trap of the bubble. The rational response to this public rejection, from a purely strategic standpoint, would be to understand it, to adapt, to moderate. But Trump's psychology forbids this. Admission of error is impossible. Therefore, the only path forward is further retreat, deeper into the bubble. More rallies in deep red territories where crowds are pre-screened. More interviews with friendly propagandists. More governance by executive order, away from public scrutiny. This isolation will only widen the disconnect, making the next inevitable foray into the public sphere even more perilous. We are now in a dangerous and unprecedented feedback loop. Every public rejection makes Trump more volatile and isolated. Every act of volatility, like the factory incident, deepens public disgust, leading to more rejection, like the feared Super Bowl booing. His team's solution is to hide him, which only confirms the public perception that he is afraid of them, which further erodes his stature. The Super Bowl was the canary in the coal mine. It was the moment his handlers officially recognized that the crowd, his greatest weapon, had become his greatest vulnerability. They chose to shelter him rather than risk the truth being revealed to 100 million people in real time. But you cannot hide a presidency forever. The midterms loom. There will be other stadiums, other factories, other public appearances where the environment cannot be perfectly sterilized. The bubble is porous, and each time it bursts, the crack in the mirror widens. The image of the strong, beloved leader is being replaced, frame by frame, with a new, indelible portrait. A president panicking in the face of his own people, reduced to flipping them off from behind a rope line, then running away to hide. The crowd has turned, and in that turn, they are not just voicing disapproval. They are shattering the central myth of the Trump presidency, one deafening boo at a time.